Seedance 2.0 and Kling 3.0 are two of the most powerful AI video models on the planet, yet most people are still using them completely wrong. But before we get into the tests, there's something you need to understand first. These models aren't built the same way. Seedance is the premium option. It focuses on insane output quality, cinematic realism, and it's the only model that processes sound natively, which is why everything it generates is always perfectly on beat. But it's expensive, and it has heavy content restrictions, especially around realistic faces. Kling 3.0, on the other hand, is cheaper, faster, and way more flexible when it comes to generating real-looking people. It's the model you can run over and over without burning through your credits. So the question isn't which one is better, the real question is which one to use and when. I've put both of them through 10 tests inside Higgsfield: cinematic quality, complex motion, image to video, sound, emotion, fight scenes, and more. And there's one result that surprised me enough to completely change how I use both of these models. So let's start where it matters most: pure cinematic quality. First, we'll head over to Higgsfield and click on Create Video. From here, we can see all the models available to us, and we'll be switching between Seedance 2.0 and Kling 3.0 throughout these tests. We'll give both a wide landscape shot with a lone figure on a cliff edge at golden hour. All prompts will be linked in the description. Here's what came back. Now on paper, Kling should have the edge here. It outputs at native 1080p. Seedance is currently capped at 720p, but resolution isn't the whole story. Because what Seedance does with that 720p is really hard to explain until you see it for yourself. The color science, the way light behaves, the depth in the shadows, it feels like it was shot on a cinema camera. Kling looks great, but Seedance looks cinematic, and that difference is going to matter a lot depending on what you're making. So the first point goes to Seedance, but cinematic quality is only useful if the model can actually handle what's happening inside the frame. So I tested complex motion next. Now this is where Seedance's content restrictions showed up for the first time. I originally prompted both models with a martial arts sequence. Kling generated it without a problem. Seedance flagged it immediately. So I reframed it with the same motion and the same technical demands, but as a dancer, performing a complex spinning sequence instead. And that's the version Seedance cleared. Both models opened on the character realistically. Both captured the spin, but Seedance used almost every frame to showcase the motion itself. It got straight into it, held the complexity longer, and the slow motion at the peak of the spin was incredibly consistent. Kling spent more of its screen time on the intro, showing the character's feet first and panning up before getting to the actual action. It's subtle, but when you're generating action content, you want the model that maximizes the motion. Second point to Seedance, but this one was closer than the first. Now let's talk about image to video, because this test taught me something about how Seedance 2.0 actually works that most people don't know going in. To get the best out of it, you can't just drop in a text prompt. First, you need to build your character in a separate image tool. So I used Nano Banana Pro to generate a character portrait, an environment reference, a mood and lighting reference, as well as an outfit detail shot, 4 separate images. Then I fed all 4 into Seedance with a single prompt: a woman walking alone through a brutalist Eastern European courtyard in overcast afternoon light. This is what 4 references can do. Seedance maintained the character, the environment, the outfit texture, and the mood across the entire clip. Now Kling 3.0 works differently. Instead of reference images, it takes a start frame and an end frame. So I pulled those directly from the Seedance output, fed them into Kling, and used the same prompt. That way, both models were working from the same visual foundation. Kling did a solid job bridging the gap between the 2 frames. The motion was smooth and the character held up, but it's working with 2 data points. Seedance is working with 4, and you can feel that in the output. Third point to Seedance. Now in that last test, I gave Seedance 4 reference images to work with, but what happens when there are no references and both models have nothing to go on except the words in the prompt? That's where prompt adherence comes in. And this test looks at how accurately each model follows a complex multi-element text prompt, right down to camera movement, lighting direction, subject action, and mood. So I gave both models the exact same prompt: a luxury watch reveal with a slow orbital camera move. Both models followed the prompt well, but Kling edged it. The lighting direction was significantly more visible in the Kling generation. Seedance Seedance interpreted the prompt well overall, but that specific lighting detail got a little lost. It's a small margin, but in a test specifically about following instructions, the details are everything. First point to Kling. So now we know that both models listen well, but listening to a prompt and generating a convincing human being are two very different things, which is why this next test is arguably the most practical one for creators today. Because UGC style content typically features realistic people talking directly to the camera, and it's also where Seedance's content restrictions become a real problem. I prompted both models with a scene of a woman holding her phone in selfie mode, talking directly to camera about a drink flavor she really enjoys. The kind of UGC ad you see all over TikTok and Instagram. Kling 3.0 generated it without hesitation. Handheld feel, natural light, convincing delivery. It's exactly what you'd want for a UGC campaign.
Why is nobody talking about this flavor? Like, genuinely, I don't understand why this isn't everywhere yet.
Now here's where it gets interesting. Seedance blocked it. Not because the content was inappropriate, just because it involves a realistic human face. Their content policy restricts real face generation, which is mostly a deepfake prevention measure, and I get why it exists. But it does mean that for UGC content, Seedance will give you a bit of a headache. Although there is a workaround if you generate an AI portrait first and use that as a character reference. I took the nano banana portrait we generated earlier and fed it into Seedance. And here's what I got.
Why is nobody talking about this flavor? Like, genuinely, I don't understand why this isn't everywhere yet.
The realism is on another level, but it can be a hassle to use. So for user-generated content, Kling is just the obvious choice. But for our next test, the choice may not be as obvious because we're going to be generating animations. And this is where things get unpredictable. For this test, I tried two completely different animation styles on both models, anime and 3D. And Seedance had something to say about that. For the anime prompt, I started with a Ghibli-style scene featuring a girl on top of a moving train at dusk. Seedance blocked it immediately, so I reframed it completely with no people or faces. A wolf on a snowy mountain peak at dusk, howling into the valley below, blocked again. At this point, I went fully abstract. A Japanese temple courtyard at dawn, cherry blossoms falling in slow motion, no characters at all. Seedance still blocked it. 3 attempts, 3 blocks, and I genuinely still don't know why. On the other hand, Kling generated the original anime prompt without any issues. The style was clean, the motion had that hand-drawn cadence, and the colors were exactly right. So for anime, this one goes to Kling. But the 3D test told a completely different story. For the 3D prompt, I used a small robot on a rooftop holding a glowing firefly with Pixar-level detail. And this time, both models generated without a problem. Both looked genuinely impressive. But Seedance had an edge in the cinematic quality of the lighting and the emotional weight of the shot. The way the firefly's glow interacted with the robot's surface felt more considered and intentional. So for animation, it's a split. Kling takes anime by default, and Seedance takes 3D. But given that Seedance couldn't even attempt the anime test after 3 tries, I'm giving this round to Kling. So we've seen how these models handle realism, motion, and style. But what about scenes where everything is moving at once? I gave both models the same fight sequence to test complex choreography, multiple moving bodies, and impact moments. Now, before we get into the results, you can probably guess what happened with Seedance. It flagged the prompt. So just like the martial arts test, I reframed it to less combat language with the same intensity, and it cleared. Both models delivered here and handled the physical complexity quite well. The collision impact and the way bodies moved through space felt grounded in actual physics, but neither was perfect. In the Seedance generation, the first couple of punches don't quite land, but the sound effects hit like they do, even though the contact isn't really there visually. In the Kling generation, the recovery after the crate impact felt a little off. The character gets up just a touch too quickly to feel believable. Both had their moments, both had their inconsistencies. So this one's actually a tie. But for anyone making content with speaking characters, complex sound and dialogue is the test that matters most. And it's also where the difference between these two models becomes impossible to ignore. Here's something most people don't realize about Seedance. It doesn't add audio after the video is generated. It processes sound and video simultaneously in a single pass. That's why everything it generates tends to be perfectly on beat and in sync. The audio isn't layered on top. It's baked in from the start. And for this test, I wanted to really stress that. So the prompt combined layered environmental sounds, explosions, and a character delivering a line of dialogue, all at the same time.
We have maybe 3 minutes before this whole block goes down. Move!
We have maybe 3 minutes before this whole block goes down. Move!
The difference is immediately obvious. Seedance came back cinematic, immersive, and layered. The sound design felt intentional, and every element had its place in the mix, and the lip sync was perfect. Kling held its own, but the audio didn't have the same crispness, and the lip sync wasn't quite there. So when audio matters, the point goes to Seedance. So we've tested quality, motion, realism, and sound. But what about the most human thing of all? Emotion. Not just the expression, but the progression, the shift from one feeling to the next. That's what separates a good generation from a great one. So I tested 3 scenarios on both models: grief, fear, and joy. And the results were really fascinating. First up, the grief test. A woman alone in a hospital waiting room holding it together until she can't anymore. Seedance was on another level here. From the very first frame, you can see the glassiness forming in her eyes. The tear builds slowly before it eventually rolls down her cheek. Kling's generation looked great, but the emotional arc from start to finish was a little flat. The tear appeared almost out of nowhere. First emotion round to Seedance. Next, running from something terrifying. This one was closer than I expected. Both models struggled with progression here. The expression was almost the same from start to finish on both. Present, but static. They both looked scared, but neither really sold the escalation. This one's a tie. Finally, opening a gift. And this is where Kling flipped the script completely. The arc from curious to shocked to completely overwhelmed with happiness. Kling nailed every beat. You could feel each stage of that emotion landing. Seedance got there eventually, but the transitions between each feeling weren't as clean. Final emotion round to Kling. So for overall emotion, Seedance wins grief, Kling wins joy, and fear is a tie. I'll call it Seedance by a narrow margin, but it really does depend entirely on what you're trying to convey. So we've looked at quality across every dimension, but there are still 2 factors that'll likely have the biggest influence on your final decision. Because the best model in the world means nothing if the pricing and generation speed don't fit your workflow or your budget. Kling 3.0 is the more accessible option by a significant margin. It's faster to generate, cheaper per clip, and because of that, you can iterate without watching your credits disappear. Seedance is the premium model. The generations take longer and the cost per clip is higher, but when the generation needs to be flawless, the price makes sense. For volume content or anything where you need to move fast, Kling is the smarter choice. So the final point goes to Kling, which means that was 10 different tests with 2 different models, yet no clean winner. Seedance 2.0 took cinematic quality, complex motion, image to video, sound, dialogue, and emotion. Kling 3.0 took prompt adherence, UGC and realism, animation, as well as price. The fight scene was a tie. Yet still, the numbers don't tell the whole story. Seedance is built for quality above everything else, but those content restrictions are a genuine concern, and they'll catch you off guard if you're not prepared for them. Kling is built for flexibility, and it's the model you can actually build a content workflow around. Neither of these models is better than the other, because they're built for different jobs. And now you know exactly which one to reach for, depending on the situation. But these 2 are just a slice of what's available. You can access every other model all in one place inside of Higgsfield, so if you want to check it out, I will leave a link to it in the description below. And if you're wondering where every other video generator fits into this, I put them all to the test and rank them from best to worst. So click the video on screen now to check it out.